In this video, I'm looking at Scarface from 1932 and The Godfather from 1972, and how each movie shows the immigrant gangster in completely different ways. My main argument is that Scarface treats the immigrant criminal as chaotic and dangerous, while The Godfather turns the same figure into something controlled, traditional, and almost noble. Using ideas from Philip Balma and Luca Bartoni, along with readings about the immigrant myth in gangster films, I'm going to show how Hollywood's view of immigrant identity has changed over time. Both films deal with immigrant ambition and power, but they frame it in totally opposite ways. Scarface links immigrant ambition to chaos and instability, while The Godfather connects it to structure, loyalty, and tradition. In Scarface, Tony Camonte is introduced like he's trouble from the moment he appears. His accent is very exaggerated and his personality is loud and flashy. The movie leans heavily into the stereotypical image of an Italian immigrant. This connects directly to Philip Balma's argument in setting the Italian American Gangster in stone. Balma explains that early films like Little Caesar and Scarface didn't just rely on stereotypes, they created the blueprint for the Italian American gangster in American culture. Tony isn't written like a real immigrant with a full life behind him. He's more like what Balma describes, a fixed image these early films used to represent an entire community. The style of the violence in Scarface also adds to this stereotype. Everything is fast, loud, and messy. The neon X after every murder almost makes Tony's ambition look cartoonish. By the final shootout, Tony is less than a person and more of a symbol of immigrant chaos spiraling out of control. And then, about 40 years later, Hollywood completely transformed the image they once created. In The Godfather, the immigrant gangster becomes almost an institution. Don Corleone is calm, quiet, and thoughtful, and the lighting in the picture on the right makes him look like a leader or a patriarch instead of just a stereotype. The film focuses on family, tradition, and discipline. Crime becomes structured business. It's the opposite of the chaotic, exaggerated world in Scarface. This shows a shift in how immigrant ambition is understood. Not wild or dangerous, but ritualized and organized. Michael's transformation really highlights this. His time in Sicily reconnects him with heritage, and the restaurant assassination shows how controlled and deliberate Corleone's violence is. Nothing here feels chaotic, everything was planned. When you put the two films side by side, the difference is obvious. Tony Camonte represents the exaggerated stereotype that Balma describes, loud, impulsive, and simplified. The Corleones are the exact opposite, calm, strategic, and almost artistic. The version of the immigrant gangster is built around discipline and tradition. And as Luca Bartoni points out, later filmmakers actually had to push back against early stereotypes like the one in Scarface because they came so iconic and deeply rooted. Seeing Tony and Michael next to each other in these two images makes this evolution very, very clear. Both films are ultimately about immigrants trying to find belonging and power in America. But one story shows ambition turning into chaos, while the other shows ambition turning into structure and legacy. When we look at Scarface and The Godfather together, we see the full evolution of the Italian American gangster image. Balma explains how early films like Scarface carved the stereotype in stone. The Godfather then polished that image and turned it into a myth, a noble version of the gangster tied to culture and tradition. And as Bartoni shows, that stereotype became so strong that later directors felt the need to challenge it directly. Both films deal with the same idea, immigrant ambition, but the way they portray it reveals how much Hollywood and American attitudes have changed over time. Thank you for listening, and this is my works cited.